Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is a health and life coach. She is also the co-founder of Women in It Together. Today's guest is Erica Weiner. Erica, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm excited.
For sure. So Erica, we're going to jump right into what I like to call the 4 warm-up questions, just to kind of get the conversational ball rolling, so to speak. I've got 4 questions I like to ask all of my guests. The first question I have for you is, how do you start your day? Do you have a specific morning routine or morning ritual that you like to stick to on most mornings?
Yeah, I love that question because I think there's such awareness these days around that it's so important how we start our day kind of sets the tone for the way that the rest of the day plays out. So I definitely have a way I like to start most mornings. But as much as I have the things I like to do each morning, there's also a few things on my not to do list. So for example, no social media for me for the first hour of waking up is really important. And if I can include no work emails and no text messaging, I do. And then after that, I actually do what I call a flexible routine. In the past, I used to have this long list of like 10 to 15 things I had to do before I felt like I was ready to start my day. And then if I didn't get to all of them, I already started the day feeling like a little bit of a failure.
Yeah.
So now with my flexible routine, I wake up and there's certain things I like to do. I definitely hydrate and take my supplements. Sometimes I'll meditate or do breath work. And then otherwise I have this big toolbox of self-care, and I just wake up in the morning like, what do I need right now? And I travel quite a bit for my day job. So sometimes when I'm on the road, all I have time for is 5 deep breaths and got to, get ready for the day. So just kind of take it step by step.
Okay. Now, that's very interesting in the sense of like the flexible routine, because I've never heard that terminology used with all the different conversations I've had, and like I think I can count on one hand how many people don't have that I've had on my podcast as guests that don't have like a very specific morning routine.
Yeah.
So I want you to expound a little bit more, Erica, in terms of, because you talked about maybe in the past you maybe had some sort of a rigid morning routine, and then if you don't, kind of check all the boxes, then, you're like kind of starting off on the wrong foot, so to speak, or maybe that created some anxiety for you. So I want you to just, if you don't mind, dig a little bit deeper and explain a little bit how you, again, came to that point of having a more flexible routine as opposed to having that rigid routine, and how that really helps you and how that might help some of the listeners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am recovering, I'd say almost recovered perfectionist.
Yeah.
So, back in the day, it was about, okay, I'm going to wake up, and when I do all these things, it would also feed my sense of self-worth. That if I do these things, then I'm worthy and then I'm enough for the world. And going through my own personal healing journey and realizing that I don't have to do anything to feel enough or feel worthy, it more became about taking care of myself. And like I said, I travel quite a bit. So if I have a routine that I want to do every morning, if I'm at home or if I'm on the road, that's going to look different because I'm not going to have everything I'd like to have on the road. For instance, a lot of mornings I like to have a smoothie for breakfast. I don't have access to a blender on the road, so I have to make it okay if maybe I can grab some berries or whatever I have access to. And it also comes down to self-trust. That was something part of my story, like not trusting myself that I know how to take care of myself or that I know what I need. So instead of doing what, society says, like, oh, wake up and set your intentions and do this and then stretch and do all that, I can come to each moment and think, okay, well, I'm feeling a little anxious right now, so I need to just calm my nervous system. Or maybe I'm feeling really excited and I want to put on some of my favorite tunes and dance around and get my mindset that way.
Yeah.
Or I used to fall into, not the trap, but when I discovered meditation, I was like, oh, well, now I have to do this every day for like an hour and it's going to be amazing. But the truth is, like, now I do meditate, but it's usually maybe in the evening for a little bit before I go to bed to calm my mind. But I don't like meditating in the morning. I'd rather do mindful movement or a moving meditation. And to be honest, I take that throughout the day with me. So I try to become mindful and feel that sense of calm at any point during my day, where maybe I become aware that my thoughts are getting away from me or something. So I guess the point of it is the flexibility in my self-care and routine is there to not be a stressor for me, because sometimes we can get caught up in like, I have to do all this to be the highest functioning human being possible.
For sure.
But really, it's like, if all I have time for is 5 deep breaths, then I'm going to take those 5 deep breaths with the intention that that's for me and it's enough. And then just that could like reset me just as much as doing 2 hours of a self-care routine.
Yeah.
So that's where it's been an evolution, and it's taken, quite a few years to get to that point. But now I can definitely say that's like, if I wake up and my morning doesn't go exactly as planned, I have this sense of like, well, it's okay. Like, I'm going to be fine.
Cool. All right. We're going to come back to the recovering perfectionist because that's terminology that I use all the time. But now, one more thing before we move on to the next warm-up question.
Yeah.
You mentioned, and this, as I spend more time, obviously, in the fitness industry and listening to the podcasts and, personal development, self-help, all this stuff, right? This no social media thing is starting to become more prevalent. I'm starting to hear about it more.
Yep.
I also, mine's not within the first hour, but the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning is not grab my phone like I used to. So specifically for you, Erica, just touch on why no social media, you try not to text, no emails for that first hour of your morning.
Sure. And actually, the first time I heard about this was from Ed Millett on his podcast, like maybe a year or two ago. And it's really about setting a tone for the day that is not reactive, but more intentional.
Absolutely.
So if I wake up and I grab my phone and I see text messages or emails from my boss, or maybe I posted something last night and I opened my Instagram and like not enough people liked it, like just those little ego things. And then all of a sudden it's like, I always try when I wake up to immediately just move into the energy of gratitude and bliss and just be like, I love everything. And then I look at my phone and it can just eat away at that energy. If you're like, even if you're the most aware person, you can get caught up in that.
Course.
So it is, for me, it's just about like, how do I want to start what energy do I want to start my day with? And for me, the hour, like, really could probably be 10 minutes, because if I don't reach for it for the first 10 minutes, then I go off and do things that are much more fulfilling and I'm not even thinking about it anyway. So, sometimes it's an hour, sometimes it's more. But that's just kind of, I have it written on a little Post-it note by my nightstand, like just as a reminder before I go to bed and when I wake up. But at this point, it's like a habit anyway.
Of course.
So, but I'd say it's the reactivity, just getting away from that.
Very cool. All right. The second question, favorite book or book that you like to gift often? Yeah,
so my favorite book right now that I reference a lot and think about a lot is Jack Canfield's The Success Principles.
Okay.
It's 64 of his success principles. He's the guy that did Chicken Soup for the Soul. He's also a motivational, transformational speaker. I think he's still alive. But anyway, it's just it's a really easy read. It'd probably be great on Audible if you don't like real books. I like holding and reading my books.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But just really, like, for me, discipline is really important, and just like thinking in a disciplined way, being disciplined, like knowing my values, knowing who I am, and then everything that I do from there is alignment. And his success principles are just really like simple foundational things to like build your life off of. And some of them I was already doing. Some were mind-blowing. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I'm starting an accountability group with a few girls here in the area that we're just gonna get on the phone twice a month or something, and just building this support system. So it was really interesting and inspirational.
Can you share one of the success principles?
Yeah, so let me think. I mean, I think the one that comes to mind is that the accountability group.
Okay.
So this book was written, I think it was updated in 2015, but nowadays you can go find a mastermind group for anything you're looking for, and a lot of them cost a significant amount of money. But his idea is like, find your like-minded people, and find people who are at your level or even doing a little bit more. So for me, it's like, I have a new business and I want to surround myself with other people who are entrepreneurs, and we can be idea sharing. So it's like the accountability of getting on the phone together for once or twice a month and just checking in and having that built-in support system, because it's so important to have people who think like you do or have your best interest in mind, and having that support to go to.
Beautiful. All right. Favorite quote, mantra, or word. And this can be for this current season of life. Maybe it's a quote, mantra, or word for 2020. Maybe it's a favorite quote, mantra, word from a previous season of life. However you kind of want to take that, Erica.
Yeah.
Favorite quote, mantra, or word.
My favorite quote right now, I might butcher it a little bit. I just posted it on Instagram a few weeks ago, but I'm reading this book by Kyle Cease. He is phenomenal. His book is called Money is an Illusion. But the quote is, "The amount of light we emit is not based on how positively we think. It's based on how much of our darkness we can accept." And it's not like exactly. But that concept, when I read it, just like all the light bulbs went off, because it's what I've been practicing for the last few the last few months. But it was like this next level of transformation for me, in that I had been not fully accepting all of me, like my anxiety, depression, negative thoughts, whatever it is. But it's like when I just let those things be and allowed space for them, then it's like I just became that much brighter. So I just love that quote so much.
Okay, so we're gonna dive into this, because that's something when I was preparing for our conversation today on your social media, I came across that, and I came across the quote, "going into the darkness." So I came across that post, and I was reading it because I have some personal thoughts on all of that. But so I want to take a deep dive into going into the darkness. So expound a little bit more on that quote. Expound a little bit more on like your personal journey, and the value and the importance that you found, Erica, in maybe not always focusing on the light, but in order to experience more light, and to shine brighter as human beings, we need to feel the darkness. We need to experience the darkness. We need to go through the darkness. Expound on that. Like, what is that for you? Specifically, what does that mean? What does that look like? Again, like what's the power in that for you in your life?
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go back quite a bit. My journey is full of growing up and not knowing how to process my emotions, not really, not having a developed sense of self or sense of confidence. And a lot of my like 20s and early 30s were about, well, I'm still in my early 30s, but like my late 20s,
I got
was I was always scared that people wouldn't like me because I wasn't confident in myself, and I always put on a happy face, a little bit of people pleasing. And from the outside, if someone thought they knew me, they're like, "Oh, Erica's like the happiest person ever. She's got the job, she's got the car, she's got this, she's got that." But inside, I was so depressed. I mean, I don't necessarily like to even label it like that.
Yeah, I got
But just I was
turmoil. A lot of turmoil, inner turmoil.
And I'm an empath. I'm an introvert. Like I feel things so deeply, and I think now society we know how to label that, and it's more it's talked about more. But like growing up, like I was always like, "Oh, stop being so sensitive," and so stop crying so much, and so I would just suppress everything. And when you suppress emotions and feelings and thoughts for decades, eventually it starts to manifest. It can manifest physically in the body. I had a lot of chronic illness, autoimmune disorders. I had this rogue stress rash. Well, now I know it's a stress rash, but this rash that would break out every year for like 10 years, and the doctors just, they didn't know. They're like, "Oh, here, take steroids, whatever." So the point of all that is I felt deeply, but I didn't know how to process any of it or go into it. And I just numbed. So I have a history of drinking, some drugs. I was like, that was my way of not feeling it, because I didn't know how to feel all of it. And luckily, at some point I started to just, the journey happens and started to wake up and learn about personal growth and personal development, and about 3 years ago is when I started seeing my first therapist. And through all of that, started to see that it's like, oh, well, if you keep shoving all the, we can just call it darkness down, it's not going to go away. It's just going to start building up, and eventually it's going to come out somewhere.
Right, yeah, explode. Yeah.
Exactly. And so that's definitely what happened with me. And I think the first step of the journey was like learning how to process it. So like knowing that I could sit with my loneliness, or sit with the fears of not being liked, or sit with whatever other fears were coming up, and that one, I would survive. I would get through it.
Yeah.
And then if I processed it, like you remove all the dust and the smoke and the clouds, and then underneath you're like, oh, look, there's a little piece of me. And I started to figure out, oh, well, who am I? Like these are my values, and this is what I stand for, and like slowly developed this sense of self, and expanded my toolbox of how to process those emotions and feel them. And then, like I said, the last few months, like maybe the last 6 months, has really been so I'll start. I have a history of like anxiety and depression.
Right.
I don't identify like that anymore, but there are times where maybe like seasons, like you were saying, where some anxious thoughts and feelings will come up, or the depression comes back, and it's like, crap. It's like I thought I was done with this. I thought that was over.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But now what I understand is that it doesn't necessarily go away. It's just that it's part of me. And when it comes up, I'm just like, oh, my anxiety's here because I'm doing too much. I'm working out too much. I'm not eating the right foods. Maybe I need to like say no today and just like rest. And so when I was really able to just accept, again, that darkness, it's like, oh, it's there. It's part of me, and it's okay. Then I could stop spending the energy on wishing it wasn't there, and now look at all this energy I have for creating something new. So that's where, I guess it's a long-winded way of saying that, like accepting your darkness to create more light, that's what it means to me. It's like stop spending all this energy wishing that darkness wasn't there, being grateful for it, and then all of a sudden you open up all this space to let in something else.
Okay, when you say sit with it, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to like sit with your depression, sit with your anxiety, sit with the darkness, or maybe whatever negativity that you're struggling with, or trial that you're enduring? What does it mean to sit with it?
So to me that means, and I'll give you an example, earlier this year in January, I went through like 2-3 weeks where I wasn't really back where I started, because obviously I'm at a place where I can handle things better. Yeah. But it just felt, I was feeling things I hadn't felt in years. I was crying all the time, like just dealing with all this stuff. And old me would have, maybe reached for some alcohol, like gone out for drinks with friends and not dealt with it, or just got frustrated. And instead now it's like, well, okay, it's here, and I'm feeling this way, and it's okay, and I'll just, like, to me, sitting with it is just being with it and letting, it's almost like someone puts your depression in a backpack and you got to hold it, and it's like, okay, I'm just going to carry this around for a little bit until I figure out what the underlying cause is, and then I can put it down. But it's like, I always say, like, treat your anxiety or depression like your best friend. Like, invite it in, sit down with it and say, what's going on? Why are you here right now? And a lot of times that happens to me when I'm like about to let go of, like, level up, or like let go of some old story. So sitting with it is just like letting it be.
Naturally, do you like crave and like rigidity and like things being like very organized and in order?
So to some extent, yes, that's my natural, that's my old way of being, I guess. What I'm starting to step into is a softer, less rigid form of that, because what I'm finding is, like, all the rigidity and, like, the routine, in the past, that was just to feel like I was in control of something.
Of course.
But you're never really in control.
Of
so
course.
Even like with what's going on in the world right now, everyone's like, there's so much uncertainty. It's like, well, there's always uncertainty. We just do these little tricks in our head that make us feel like we are in control. So yes and no. I've gotten a lot better over the years. Even with my house, like, you know, I can like, everything doesn't have to be put away, or, you know, a little bit of chaos is okay, and I think even good for us. But
naturally though, like your tendency is to just be like everything very just like regimented, dialed in, organized, in order, right? Like,
absolutely. Especially with like all the travel I do, because traveling is chaotic in nature. Like the amount of times I'll catch myself trying to be like, oh well, my suitcase has to be packed like this, and then I have to get to the airport and do this, and all the things have to go right, and then I just be like, calm down, it's all okay. Like sometimes that's all that matters. I just kind of like snap myself out of it, and I'm like, come back to this moment, come back to what's happening right now, and it's all gonna be okay. It's kind of my mantra.
Okay, good. We're gonna get back into some of that. I do want to finish up the warm up questions here. The last one that I have for you in terms of the warm-up questions, favorite or most listened to podcast. You already mentioned Ed Milet, and he has a solid podcast.
Yeah,
so maybe if you want to touch on that, but maybe if there's another one or two that you enjoy, feel free to share.
I'll pick two, and these are two that I've listened to all the episodes, and I never miss an episode. First one is Christine Hassler's Over It and On With It. She's a spiritual psychologist, life coach, author, speaker. I am very much entrenched in her ecosystem, and she's amazing. She's a big inspiration for why I wanted to become a coach. And on her podcast, she live coaches people and then kind of does a breakdown of it.
Cool.
So not only do I get something personally out of it, but it's always a nice teaching moment for me and things that I sometimes take back to my clients. So I love her. And then the other one also is very educational and applicable to the work I do. Dr. Stephen Cabral, he has the podcast, The Cabral Concept. And he is a naturopathic doctor, functional medicine doctor, and he's also trained in Ayurvedic medicine. So he combines all of his knowledge, and his podcasts are like 30 minutes each, and he picks one topic and does a deep dive, some sort of health thing.
Cool.
And his protocols, his systems, his education, I credit, well, I mean, I did the work, but I credit him for, I mean, he helped me heal my gut. He helped me figure out that autoimmune thing that was going on last year. That was my journey, was just getting my health dialed in. So he's awesome.
Cool. Okay, so we're gonna kind of step into your backstory now, Erica.
Okay.
So if you don't mind sharing with myself and the 127 Fit podcast listeners, kind of like where did you grow up? What was the younger years like? You know, do you have any siblings? Were you involved in sports, extracurricular activities? Just kind of paint a little bit in terms of a picture, you know, like kind of what your childhood looked like, and just kind of like what you were in a younger version of Erica.
Yeah. So I grew up in Folsom, California, which is a suburb east of Sacramento. And its nickname, I don't know if they still call it this, but was Wholesome Folsom. It was a little suburb. We called it the Bubble. Nothing, you know, it was very safe. Nothing crazy ever happened. I was very lucky. So I have two older brothers, and I grew up, my parents are still married to this day. And I was very lucky that my parents, we traveled a lot. I don't know how they did it with 3 kids, but so though I grew up in a bubble, they took us out to see the world, and I got to see a lot of places. And let's see, extracurricular activities. I was kind of, my parents were always like, if you're happy, we're happy. If you like whatever you want to do, do it. And so instead of so I wanted to do everything. So I played like the trumpet. We had a piano, so I took piano lessons. I played the flute at one point. I did karate and played soccer and gymnastics, and I always I would do something for like a year and then I'd move on. So my parents were, you know, in some ways I'm like, well, I wish I had stuck with something and like mastered it, but on the other hand, they were always just like, yeah, whatever you want to do, go try that. So I always wanted to try learn a bunch of different things, and to this day, you know, I love learning new things. and I went to college. So I lived in Sacramento till I was 18, and then I went to school in Santa Barbara. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and I did grow up. My parents they're beautiful people, and I'm the youngest of 2 boys, so I was protected. And if they listen to this, I can see the look on their faces right now. But I went to school in Santa Barbara, it's a party school. I mean, most colleges are, but Santa Barbara definitely has its reputation. And
yes, it does.
Yeah, and they knew that sending me there. They tried really hard to get me to go to Cal Poly, but we went to Santa Barbara to see the campus, and they were like, it was summertime, and there were some kids taking their surfboards to the beach, and I was like, I would like to go here, please. But anyway, went to Santa Barbara and got my first taste of independence.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like the beginning of my use with alcohol and experimentation and whatnot. I got really good grades. I was excellent at time management. But yeah, so living by the beach for 4 years, that was great. And then after Santa Barbara, I went home to Sacramento. I graduated in 2008 though. And I graduated with a sociology degree, which was I loved the topic, but like no direction once I graduated. Plus with the market crashing, there wasn't much in jobs. Yeah. So I went home for a few months, and then I said peace out, and I moved to Israel, to Tel Aviv for 5 months.
Wow.
I found I'm Jewish, and so I did Birthright, which is a free 10-day trip for Jewish kids. I think it's like 18 to 20 something. So I did that right after I graduated, and then at the end of that trip, they were like, we also have this extended 5-month volunteer program. And so that's where I'd heard about it, and I just had this calling to like this adventurous spirit. I was like, I need to go see the world, go see things. And like I said, I think because my parents, we traveled so much as kids, they kind of instilled this love of travel and just experiencing new cultures and whatnot. So I went home for a little bit and then moved to Tel Aviv by myself for 5 months, which was still to this day one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I lived a few blocks from the Mediterranean Sea and got to study Hebrew and do some volunteer work. And the people I met on that trip are still some of my closest friends today. I also fell in love with a Canadian. So spent some time in Tel Aviv, fell in love with a Canadian. After Tel Aviv, I moved to Toronto for a little bit, tried to become Canadian because it was just like, I was 22 and like, this man was like my everything. That didn't work out. And funny story, he now lives in San Francisco. We're still good friends, but after all the work of trying to move to Canada, could have just waited a little longer. But anyway, ran out of money, so I went back to Sacramento, and at this point in my life, that was the last place I wanted to be. I had just had this travel bug, and I was like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I want to travel. And this was when I think the first time I ever manifested something in my life before even knowing what that was, because I thought about travel, I dreamed about travel, I talked about travel. It's all I wanted. And then I was on a plane on a random Thursday afternoon to go to LA to see my brother's band play, and I met Bob, who is the co-founder of the company that I've been with for 8 years. And just because of a random conversation that sparked up, I was like, I just want to travel. And I think at the time I had been working at a hotel planning meetings and stuff like that. And he's like, I own an events company and we plan events all over the country. And so that's how I found my current job. I met the co-founder on a plane. And then I guess I'll take it all the way to when I got to Denver. But basically I started working for that company, traveling around the US, putting on these conferences. And 6 years ago, my boss sent me to Denver because we have one of our digital government summits here. And I was here for about 48 hours, fell in love with the city, the energy, the people. I went back to Sacramento and I told my boss, I said, hey, I'm moving to Denver and I would love to keep my job because job hunting is hard. And also I'm sure you don't want to hire someone and train them. So what if I move to Denver and work remotely? And I was very fortunate that they said yes and moved myself out here, and that was 5 years ago. So
okay, so we're gonna take a couple leaps backward, and then we'll take a couple leaps forward. So All right, so I wanna go back to kind of just like your childhood and stuff. So you mentioned that you're Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something that was very prominent in your upbringing, in your home? And if so, kind of like what was that like?
Yeah, so I grew up going to a conservative synagogue. So there's different levels of Judaism, I guess. There's Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, and other variations.
Just like any other religion, there's
sure
very conservative Christianity. There's very liberal and everything in between. So
So again, I don't know how my parents did it, but my brothers and we went to a synagogue that was it was 30, 40 minutes away from our house. So they took us I have memories of going to services on Saturday, maybe not every Saturday. We definitely went to Sunday school. Once we were of age, we also did Hebrew school. So that was, I think, twice a week. I want to say it was Monday, Wednesday. So we'd go to regular school and then we'd go to Hebrew school for another, felt like 5 hours. It probably wasn't. But, and then also outside of synagogue, there was a lot of Jewish tradition in the home. My mom, my mom would cook for the holidays for Rosh Hashanah and Passover, and I have fond memories of her brisket that she still makes to this day. So being Jewish is a big part of my identity, especially because in the town where I grew up in Folsom, at the time there were not a lot of Jewish kids. So in Southern California, lots of Jewish people. When I went to college, it was the most exciting thing to meet other Jewish kids. But growing up, I actually remember many instances where people they just didn't know what it was or they didn't understand, and there was definitely some, nothing crazy, but people would make fun of me or whatever it is until Hanukkah came around and I got more presents. So then 8 days of presents. But yeah, so my parents definitely, just by doing with the traditions and taking us to synagogue, and I had a bat mitzvah and I can read and write Hebrew to this day.
Wow.
I was conversational when I lived in Israel because I did take some Hebrew in college as well. And then when I lived in, obviously immersing yourself in a culture is the easiest way to learn a language. But yeah, looking back, I'm so grateful for that because, I can't tell you a lot about Judaism, the religion,
right?
But just the culture and the identity. When I have a family one day, I hope to raise my kids Jewish and continue that on. So it was definitely a big part of who I am. It's a big part of who I am.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What would you say is outside of kind of the faith or the religious aspect of your upbringing in terms of kind of what your parents instilled in you and passed on to you? What's maybe kind of a lesson that you learned from your parents? Maybe what's just something that when you think about your mom and your dad, what do you kind of think about? What's that one takeaway from them specifically that's really just continuing to be a thread in your life as you've grown up?
When I think of my parents, I just think of two people, they did everything for me and my brothers as far as making sure we had everything we needed. They worked, they're retired now, but they worked so hard. My dad is a doctor, and my mom ran his medical practice for 30 plus years. So they were working full time, raising 3 kids. So yeah, I just think of no excuses. Do what needs to be done to take care of the family or take care of your people. Basically.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
that's very admirable. Okay, so let's go back to college and everything. So there's a lot of us that grew up in awesome homes, and then we go to college, and then we quote unquote start exploring and trying new things and different things, right? So what was that time period like for you? Because I know for me, my college experience, I didn't take full advantage of my college experience, and I was going through some different personal things, but a lot of times people will say they look back on their, especially their undergraduate years, is a lot of people say those are the best 4 years of my life, right? For various reasons, but just kind of in terms of socially and maybe coming out of your shell and the exploration and just being kind of at the college that you wanted to be at. What were those 4 years like for you, Erica?
So it feels like so long ago. College for me was like now looking, I think the only way I relate to it is just like, how does it fit into my story now? Like, how did it help me blossom into the beautiful human I am today? Because I was really lost back then. Like I said, I moved there and I discovered drinking, and I think, because like I said, I feel so deeply and I feel so intensely, and now I know how to go into those feelings or accept those feelings and not get lost in them. But back then, I think it was just so overwhelming. Like, life was so overwhelming, and I'm also an empath, so being around people, like, someone could be saying something to me, but I'm like, that's not what I'm not feeling that's what you mean. And but I didn't know how to to make sense of that back then. So when I started drinking, I think it just started numbing all the craziness and chaos that was happening internally. So it was like talk about rigidity, like, or the perfectionism, and like the type A personality that I have as well. Give me a little alcohol, and all of a sudden I'm like, I like to think I'm kind of funny and charming, and the thoughts slow down, and I can just be like, look, I'm so fun. And I remember I have friends who would tell me, oh, you're so fun when you drink. And I'd be like, well, what does that mean when I don't drink? What are you saying? So to me, when I look back at college, like, I don't like to regret anything. It all happened the way it was supposed to happen. Like I said, I went to class and I got my grades and I got my degree. I was hungover most of it, and that was also the beginning of a lot of my health conditions, if you want to call them that, as far as like the first time I got that quote unquote autoimmune rash or disorder. And now looking back, it was because of stress. Stress was the underlying cause. But of course, it wasn't being treated for that back then.
Of course.
So I look back at college and I just think I needed to be that lost, because it helped me on my journey that eventually got to understand what was going on and make sense of it and process and stop drinking.
Okay, I want to touch on the recovering perfectionist thing, because that's something that I profoundly relate to, and like you just mentioned type A personality and like all of that, like that's how I am. And like my own personal journey, it's been such a there's so many ebbs and flows, and there's been so much breakthrough personally for me over the last several years. But like my anxiety and like all of this inner turmoil, like I look back and on my story, and it's like my tween years, and a lot of it, as I've looked back and examined, a lot of it for me was like performance anxiety, because I was an athlete, and it's like I've got to work harder, and like it just all this. And I don't want to get into that, because people that have listened to a lot of these episodes have heard me talk about it, but so I can relate and I get it. So talk about being a recovering perfectionist. Talk about like perfectionism. Talk about like this rigidity, because like even like earlier when I asked you about it, because like I can, even though you've come so far, like I can still sense that. I get that energy from you, right? For sure. And we've only met a little bit in the past, so we don't really know each other. But like I still can feel that energy from you. So I want you just to touch on that and talk about that. When did it really start to come to be? When did like the anxiety and all of that type of stuff, that again, I like to use that word turmoil, that kind of sums up the depression and anxiety and perfectionism and all those different words, right? When did that come on the scene? And then like, I want you to talk more about that darkness and working through that, because I feel like nowadays in our culture, there's more people talking about anxiety, depression, the darkness and all that, which on one hand, I appreciate that, and I'm thankful, because we're right around the same age. So when we were growing up, like I never heard nobody talk about anxiety, depression, none of that stuff, right? And if they did, it was like, okay, those people are weird, they're on medication, whatever, right? Right. So, there's a lot more people talking about it now, which I think is good, but then also there's a lot of people talking about it, and I think it can be bad, because then everybody's like, oh, I've got anxiety, and I've got, it's like, okay, like everybody's got some sort of like anxiousness in their lives over different things, but there's different levels, just like we mentioned, like with with religion, right? Yep. So just talk about your personal experience, because that's where that power of your story and kind of like some of these experiences that you're sharing on the podcast, that's where it's going to really touch people and, really, impact them positively. So just explain and take that however you want in terms of kind of like the anxiety, the depression, recovering perfectionism, being rigid and all that.
Yeah, so I'll start with the perfectionism because I think that's like a good root cause for a lot of the other stuff.
Yep.
But the way I understand it is we develop those tendencies because, like, growing up, I was a good girl, and I was good in school, and I got praise from my teachers, and I got good grades. Oh, you're such a good girl. Here, now we can celebrate with ice cream, or whatever it is. So I learned that if I was good, I would get love and affection and attention, and not that I didn't get it if I wasn't. Like, I was, like I said, I grew up with amazing parents, and that wasn't an issue. But the point is, like, even if it's just subconsciously, you're like, oh, if I do these things, then I get love, praise, and affection, and those things feel good. So then the more you do that, and later in life, it can turn into this more this extreme of, well, everything has to be this way or else I'll lose that attention. And I think it's a little bit like when they say it's like a fish discovering water, right? Like, this was just how I existed, how I was.
Yeah.
It wasn't a conscious thing. I wasn't doing it on a purpose. It's just like habit and my comfort zone. But and this was only like in the last 3-4 years of kind of discovering, like, oh, that's a thing that I do, and I don't have to do it because and this is also a source of stress, and then the anxiety and depression or whatever. Like, because to me, anxiety and depression too, like, those are symptoms. Like, and that's something I work with people on, is like, stop identifying with them. You are not your feelings. You are not your anxiety. You are 100%. Not your depression. Because actually I work with a therapist now that I love. But my very first therapist, like, within 5 minutes of sitting down with her, she's like, how long have you been depressed? And so that was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, I'm depressed. And all of a sudden, like, it took me a while to detach from that. But so the point of it is, like, the perfectionism was something that I had to unpack over, I'd say, years. And it's still, and like you said, you can still sense it from me because it's definitely still there in a lot of ways. But I can also catch myself in the act now. So if I'm doing an Instagram story, or if I'm in a meeting with someone or something, and I'm starting to feel my the anxious energy get going, I can stop, like, why am I feeling this way? Oh, it's because I'm trying to be perfect. And, like, no one's perfect. But at the same time, we are all perfect exactly as we are, right? Like, it's this double-sided thing. So for me, it's just been around the awareness. Once I realized that it's like, oh, I'm trying to be perfect, but I'm already perfect the way I am. Now it's a matter of just becoming aware when I'm trying to reach these unattainable goals, or when I'm putting conditions on myself, like, oh, I have to do this and then I can feel loved. And sometimes some days are easier and some days aren't, but it's just about, like, being mindful and coming back to who I really am. And then I think you wanted me to touch on a little, like, about the anxiety and depression. Same with that, like, fish discovering water. I remember the moment when I was like, oh, like, because that's just how I felt. I was just outside of everyday life. I mean, there was a good part of my life where, like, if I wasn't in front of people, I was crying. If I was by myself, I was crying. Like, I just couldn't handle very much. But then as I started educating myself and going to therapy and listening to these podcasts, reading these books, and going into that darkness to do the healing work. So Christine Hassler, who I mentioned earlier, she has a book called Expectation Hangover, where it basically takes you through, like, her thing is clearing out your past so you can make room for your future. And I had to go into my childhood and go into the memories from college and all these times with people that hurt me, or whatever it was, and just see what stories were created from that, what limiting beliefs existed because of my past experience, acknowledging those limiting beliefs, and then rewriting them into new ones that were more self-serving. And the thing with anxiety and the depression, once I started doing the work, and again, acknowledging, like I said earlier, it's like, I like to think of them as my best friends, like, invite them in, like, how you doing? Why are you here? And then once you do that, it's like they don't hold as much power over you, or at least they didn't for me. And that's how it is now. It's like they can still pop up, but they're not as charged. And I know that's not who I am. They're just here to warn me or tell me something. And it's just you're shifting the way you're used to existing.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time and it takes patience and it takes support. Like, I've worked with therapists, I worked with my own coaches. Like, I went all in on my healing because as soon as I learned, like, oh, I don't have to feel like this all the time, I was like, all right, yeah, I would love. And like, now I know it's like you're never really there. Like, you're always continuing to heal and learn and get better. But yeah, there was a good like summer. I went through an identity crisis. Essentially, I had to like rewrite who I wanted to be and like, in a sense, just go into that darkness so I could like dig it up and let it go.
Okay. Now, in terms of just kind of like, okay, I want to talk about love. Okay. Because there's one of your posts on your Instagram said something about like the 3 things you love about yourself. Maybe like, these are like, if you're trying to like maybe retrain your thinking or something like that. This was kind of like, I think, a practice that you were encouraging people to do. So first of all, I want you to answer 3 things that you, Erica, love about yourself. And then I want you to, from your perspective, your experience, how you would like, explain it to other people, what is love? Because I obviously I don't ask all my guests this question, but I've asked a lot of my guests this question because like we're living in this kind of like this self-love, age. And it's talked about a lot on social media and self-help and self-improvement, all that.
Right. And
I'm not going to give my personal opinion on it, but I've had quite a few guests, talk about it, and it's been a very transformational, concept for them and who they are today, right? Just loving themselves and self-love and all that, right? So 3 things you love about yourself, and then to you, what is love? What is love in terms of like a definition?
Sure. So 3 things I love about myself. I love my sense of humor. I think I'm pretty funny. And for someone who in the past has had self-love was like one of my first steps on my journey, and a lot of that was like loving my body and learning how to love my body exactly as it is. So I can definitely I love my body, and I love how caring I am with myself and other people.
Okay, so what is love? Like, what is the definition for you, Erica, in terms of love? And I don't even really like using the word love in our culture because it's such a broad word, and like in other cultures there's different words for different types of love, right? In the Hebrew, I believe, right?
Ahava,
yeah. So what is the definition of love to you in the terms of the way you understand it?
So I love that question. So the first thing that I go to is because I talk about self-love a lot,
right? And
I talk about the difference between self-love and self-compassion. And when I talk about self-love, I talk about it in like it's accepting ourselves exactly as we are. And so I guess I haven't really thought of it like just love in general, but I think that is a good way to say it. Like when you love, you are just accepting what is as it is with no, like not putting any expectations on it to be anything else. So I think that's what I would go with.
Okay. So do you like what's your take on this whole self-love movement that we're living in? Like, what's your personal opinion and perspective? Because like for me, I think there's not just with like the self-love talk and that whole thing, but there's just a lot of things that I think there might be some sort of truth in it and some positive things that you can take away from it, but then I think sometimes people take it too far and it's like
or like use it as a buzzword.
It's like over the top. It's like extreme, right? And then I think people take this self-love concept, and it's just like they're like, just so caught up in themselves, and I personally don't believe that's healthy. So from your perspective and just your again your experience, where are you at with this whole self-love movement that we're seemingly living in nowadays?
I am all about it. The reason why, and I'll start with a little bit about my personal journey with it, because this is why I'm so passionate about it. But again, before I really turned inward, and the way I like to describe it is like I was running around this earth waiting for someone outside of me, someone else, something to come along and make me feel better, because I was feeling chaotic inside. And so I was like, well, when I get a boyfriend, then I'll feel loved, or this therapist, then now I'll be fixed. Oh, if I buy all these new things or whatever, then I'll feel better. And the turning point was, Erica, no one's going to fix you. You have to do it. Like, no one's going to love you because you don't even love yourself. So it was this realization of, oh, well, no wonder, nobody else could ever live up to my expectations or make me feel better, because I didn't even know how to make myself feel better, so to speak. So for me, like I talked a little bit about body love. I always say like one of the first, but in the beginning, one of the practices, self-love practices I did, I have like a lot of us have stretch marks. I have stretch marks on my thighs, and I used to always see them in the mirror and be like, ugh, gross. I wish they weren't there. Those are terrible. Who could ever love me with those? That kind of self-talk. So I bought some like fancy organic lotion, and every night I would rub them on my stretch marks, and I would say, I love you, stretch marks. And it was like, and the first few times I did it, I cried and was like, this is weird and whatever. But what I was doing, I was rewiring the way like my thoughts worked when I saw myself or when I looked at myself. Because if I'm running around speaking badly to myself or hating myself or whatever it is, one, I'm going to attract other situations where people aren't respecting me, or that's what I think I deserve, so that's what I'll take from other people. But when I started to really practice self-love and self-care, it slowly pulled me out of the depths of self-hatred. And I think where self-love, this talk of self-love, it can get kind of surface level, because people are like, oh, love yourself. Or even if, on my Instagram, I'm like, say 3 things you love about yourself right now. Like, that's great, and it can be a step, but you do have to go deeper.
For sure. You
say you love yourself, but then can you feel that love for yourself? Or when I'm working with someone on just developing those feelings, I'm like, think about your pet, or if you have a baby, like think about your baby and think about all those like loving feelings. Like a baby can't do anything wrong, a kitten can't do anything wrong, and then I'm like, feel those feelings, and now look at yourself in the mirror and feel those feelings for yourself. And the first time, if someone's doing that for the first time, it can be shocking, because they're like, oh, like I like some people don't even realize how mean they are to themselves. Like, especially if you have a loud inner critic or just self-critical thoughts. So yeah, I think self-love sometimes can be a buzzy word that people like to throw around. But I think when you really implement the principles behind it and get into like rewiring your brain to love yourself first, then once you love yourself and treat yourself well, you're going to attract healthier relationships. You're going to, even at work, you might start standing up for yourself a little more. That's it just, for me, it's opened so many doors to what's possible. And yeah, I think it's super important.
What did your experience? What's the gentleman's name that was the Canadian? What's his first name?
His name is Guy.
Guy. Okay, cool. So what as you were doing this deep work and looking back on your childhood and your younger years and all that, because every human being has their first in love, like euphoric experience with another human being, right? Yeah. And you're like, oh, this is the person I'm going to marry. Life's going to be happily ever after, all that stuff, right? And then it doesn't go that way usually. So what, as you were looking back on that specific experience, because you brought it up earlier in your story, that specific experience with Guy, like what, as you look back, like what's the takeaway from that relationship, that experience that, you now are able to kind of like add that to your life so that you can just continue to, grow and mature in terms of your evolution process? Yeah,
that's a fun question because I've actually talked about this with him. And he was actually a big part of my healing. He randomly reached out to me, I think it was like 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. Like, it was just like, hey, thinking about you. Sorry about the way things ended up. And at that moment, I was like crying in my kitchen, eating Easy Mac or something. And like, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to hear from you. And then over that summer, like, he's a very special person, but basically, what happened with us, we were very young, and like I was like, I'll move to Canada and be with you, and he was like, oh my God, commitment, no thank you. And so we couldn't be together. And like, I think the subconscious limiting belief that came from our breakup was fear of loss. Mm-hmm. Because he was the first guy that saw me and still accepted me and loved me and wanted to be with me. Like, I never really had a serious relationship before that. Yeah. So then when we broke up, then it was like, oh, well, subconsciously now I believe that if I am myself in a relationship, he'll leave. And the pattern, honestly, for for the next decade or so, I was really I was like looking for love and looking for relationships, but not getting close enough that I could get hurt again. Mm-hmm. Again, this is all like subconsciously. Yeah. But I had never really healed from that. And in a combination, so this is like, 10 years later, again, he like texts me and I'm like eating my mac and cheese and crying and starting to go through my work, and being able to be in contact with him again and talk through things with him, and then learning processes that you can go back and like talk to your past self and be like, it's okay, like you did everything you could, you did nothing wrong, like we can let this go now. And by going through these like kind of spiritual processes, again, like not making the darkness wrong, but accepting it, acknowledging it, and then stop resisting it, and then like making room for something else. So if there was a lesson, it was just like that it was all okay. And even though you're like, gosh, you spent 10 years, chased, like, just, there was a lot going on in those 10 years.
Of course, yeah.
But it all had to happen because that's what my soul needed. I needed to experience all that heartbreak, all those things, all those relationships to get to a point where I could be like, oh, okay, like, it is as easy as just being like, I have compassion for myself and my past self for going through those things, and now I can move on.
Yeah. Do you believe that we have to let go of our past completely in order to move forward into our future?
I do think so, because even if you think about it, like the past and future only exist in our head. Like, everything is right now. So if we're even holding on to a little bit from our past, we're holding on to something. Like, imagine if you're holding on, like you're constantly thinking about what your ex is doing, or you're worried about your job, or you're worried about this, you're worried about that, anything from your past. What then are you blocking from coming into your life? Like, what energy, the energy that you're using to hold on to your past, like what could you be using that energy on to produce something in your future? And I don't think it's like super easy, just like, just let go. But even when it comes to like right now, I've been focusing a lot on like physical things. I'm pretty good about like not keeping clutter and not holding on to things forever. Mm-hmm. But even like things that like ex-boyfriends gave me, like I see them like, oh, if I let go of this, like I'm losing a piece of myself. But really that's not true. It's like honor it, and then it's like let it go, and like what space will you make for something new, energetically and physically. So yeah, I do believe that we're not meant to hold on to things or a past forever. Like we can remember them, but we're not meant to, it keeps us stuck, I think.
Do you believe that everything happens for a reason?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Expound on that, because I came across that on your IG, so I want you to just kind of touch on that. Why do you believe everything happens for a reason?
Because I've experienced it. Because everything that's happened in my life has been part of getting me to where I am now. Especially recently, like I said, I've been planning conferences for 8 years. And last year I co-founded a women's group. And the reason, luckily my friend and I did it together, and we both complement each other in like the skills that we have. But like what I brought to the table was logistics of our event planning, because I've been doing that for so long. And for a long time in my job, like I loved I love what I do, but there was like this pull of like, oh, like I've been doing it forever, and is this really what I'm meant to be? Well, whatever. But yeah, like I got that job. That's what brought me to Denver. Mm-hmm. It's what's given me the experience to start planning these women's groups, and then even like. And again, this is a theme for this year, I'd say, but like unshakable trust in the process, because everything happens for a reason. So even like earlier this year when I said I had those few weeks where I was just like down and I was like, why am I feeling like this? But the whole time I was just like, okay, I'm like supposed to feel like this because I'm supposed to figure something out, or maybe I'm not supposed to figure something out. Maybe I'm just supposed to take a breather, and like my body needs some rest. Mm-hmm. So whether it's, quote unquote good or bad, like everything happens because the universe is, whether you're listening or not, the universe is politely nudging you in the direction you're supposed to go. It's just, maybe you're resisting and not like getting there as quickly as you could. Okay. But yeah, I do believe everything happens for a reason.
Me too. All right. So we kind of left off in terms of your story when you, went from childhood. We left off to moving here to Denver and everything. What was kind of like, I want you to touch on, because you mentioned like, you've mentioned like the event planning, you've been doing that for 8 years, but then also before we turn on the mic, you mentioned like you were doing some personal training at one point in time. So just kind of touch on maybe some, outside of the event planning and things like that steady job, expound a little bit more on some of the explorations that you've gone through in terms of maybe personal training, and then just kind of lead into now being like a health and life coach. And then, I also want you to, talk more about women in it together, and just kind of like, tie everything together in terms of the importance of community and having that accountability. So first of all, just touch on maybe some of the different things you've explored outside of your main job, how that's led you to the health and life coaching, and then the women in it together, and just the importance of community and things like that.
Yeah. So I think 3 years ago, like when I first started getting into just personal growth and development and realizing that I had a passion for it, and I was like, ooh, wow, like maybe one day I can like get paid for something in this. And I've been working out since growing up, we had a treadmill in our house, and I have memories of like walking on the treadmill and watching TV at night. Like, and I've just been active my whole life. Yeah. When I moved to Denver, I went to a little gym downtown called Fit 36. It's a HIIT gym. I'd been going there for 2 years, and I was like, it'd be really cool to teach here because I love it so much. So that year I studied. I got my personal training certificate through ACE, and I got my certificate in November, and then I went to the owners and I was like, hey, can I teach here? And they were like, have you ever trained anyone before? And I was like, no, but you know me, and I'm super fun, and I learn quickly, and I love fitness, and it'll be fine. So they're like, okay, staff meetings tomorrow. So last year I was I didn't have a lot of time to do it, but a few times a month I was a trainer at Fit 36, and that was like a big, just getting out of my comfort zone. It was my first time and I was kind of getting up in front of my peers and, leading these classes, and it was an awesome experience. And then once I got that, I discovered health coaching. And so I was like, oh wait, this is more what I'm passionate about. Cause like I'd mentioned through Dr. Stephen Cabral, I started healing myself, and I was like, wow, I bet I could help other people do this. So then I studied and got my health coaching certificate through ACE as well. And then once I got done with that, I was like, well, I do like the health stuff because I've always been very health conscious and constantly learning more about that world. But what really like lit me on fire was the behavioral psychology aspect of it. Like, how do you help? It's like habit coaching. How do you help people create healthy habits or shift habits maybe they don't want anymore and replace them with new ones? And that's like the psychology of it was just like amazing for me. So that's when I decided, and I actually call myself a holistic health and life coach, because whether someone is coming to me, I don't attract a lot of fitness clients, though I can obviously do that, but it's more like health stuff, people trying to improve their sleep. More so it's anxiety. People coming to me because they have severe anxiety and they want to work on that. But then if we're looking at your anxiety, we're going to look at, well, what are you eating? What is your sleep quality? What's your stress like? What are your spiritual practices? It's like this, looking at the whole person. So if someone comes to me for anxiety, it's never just about anxiety.
Of course not.
You know? And so it's just been this beautiful, again, like the steps taking through, like having the foundation in like fitness and movement, and then to health, and then now exploring the more like the psychology of everything. And Women in It Together came about because, again, once I started waking up and learning about all this stuff, I was slowly leaving behind my, weekends at the bars, and I had a lot of good friends in Denver, but they were like my party friends, and I was like, well, I want to get together with people on Friday night and talk about personal growth. And so I was like, well, I'll join a women's group or something, because I learned about the importance of like women getting together. Didn't quite find what I was looking for, so long story short, my friend Debbie and I decided to start one on our own. We just passed our year anniversary last December.
Awesome.
And the idea of it is like this idea of support. Like I usually say, my mission in life is to help others feel supported. And like whether it's through one-on-one coaching or community is so important, like you said. Having a safe space where you feel like you can be yourself, you can get support. Like life is crazy, and sometimes you just need to be around people who understand that.
For sure.
And accept you as you are. So Women in It Together is just like the most amazing thing I've ever done with my life. And the women that have found us, we started an Instagram for it, and just like, so we just post about like our values and who we are and what we do, and the people that find us are just so aligned with our mission that it's mind-blowing. And like if you had asked me a few years ago if people like this existed, I would have been like, no, everyone sucks. But but then when you change your mind and you rewrite your story, I'm like, yeah, the people are out there. I just need to make this vehicle like so they can find us. And then they're everywhere. So we live in this, like, social media is a beautiful tool. It can get a little addicting. Sometimes you have to set good boundaries with it. But we live in an amazing time where
we do, yeah.
Like, people like you and me, we're figuring out that there's more to life than just like we're all meant. Like I think our mission in life is just figure out what you're passionate about, figure out what lights you on fire, and then do that.
Okay, you've mentioned a couple of times like the word value or values, referring to values. Earlier, you like the kind of the beginning of our conversation during the warm up questions, you mentioned like the importance of like discipline and values in your life, and you just mentioned values again as you were talking about Women in It Together. What are your personal values?
Health, loyalty, growth, freedom, and then this year abundance, and then this year I added pleasure, just in like general, like to help a little bit with like less rigidity and like do things that make me feel good.
Okay, so one more time, what are they? Health, loyalty,
growth, abundance, freedom, and pleasure.
Okay, so all right, so we kind of touched on health already. Touch on loyalty. Like, what does that mean to you?
Loyalty has always been this thing. I think I grew up feeling like not a lot of people had my back, besides my family and my parents, for sure. But I always felt like I attracted people in my life that were flaky, weren't true to their word, and that obviously had its place and reason. But at some point growing up, I decided it's like, if I, like, my word is all I have. If I say something, I'm going to follow through. And, you know, the people in my life, my inner circle or community, like, are important. And so to me, loyalty is just about staying true to your word and being there for yourself and to those people who are like your true people.
All right, growth. What is that, and what does that mean to you?
Growth for me is like always keep learning, always keep bettering myself so I can better those around me.
Abundance.
There is plenty of love, money, joy, happiness, everything in the world to go around. And so just not always coming up from that sense instead of a place of lack.
Growth mindset. Is that kind of?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like there's always enough. There's always a new place to go. Yeah.
Freedom. What's that mean to you?
Freedom is just wanting to feel free and expansive and not like just the freedom to act, be, and do everything the way I want to do it. I guess.
Unrestricted?
Yeah. Commitment free. No, just kidding.
Yeah. I do not like to feel restricted at all.
Yeah.
I've got some work to do on all that, especially when it comes to like relationship stuff, because man, I just start getting a little anxious. I'm like, oh man, I don't know about this. Okay, so you kind of already touched on it quickly, but pleasure, like you just kind of mentioned, just, you know, experiencing life more, right?
Yeah, and I just finished Julianne Vaccaro's program. She's a somatic sexologist, and she came into my life at a point when I was starting to explore like sexuality and even pleasure in that sense. And she teaches how to just get back into your feminine energy, because a lot of the times women can be more in their masculine and do. And again, it even goes back to perfectionism. Like, I have to do all these things perfectly to be worthy or feel loved. So the pleasure part was it's just like a reminder that to soften and just be like, I can just exist and life can still happen and be amazing. I don't have to, it's like less force.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we've touched on that. We won't dive into it right now with you, but we've talked about with several guests on the podcast about the masculine and the feminine, and specifically referring to, like, I've had discussions with females about, there's times where you have to kind of experience that masculine. We live, I'd say, overall in a very masculine world, especially like the business world. But then the importance of females understanding their feminine, especially when it comes to like a male-female relationship, an intimate relationship. Like, that's like, I don't want to really go there with you just because we've covered that a lot. Sure. But man, it's some fascinating information and exploration.
I learned a lot from Julianne.
I had a I'll have to introduce you to her if you don't already know her. I can't remember her name off the top of my head right now, but like she's a sensuality coach or whatever. So that was it was an awesome episode. So exploring all the good things. Yeah. So okay, so I want to just touch on let's talk about just kind of like. You mentioned earlier, like finding your passion, finding what sets your soul on fire, and kind of like that's kind of like what you believe is kind of the purpose of our existence as human beings here on this earth. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Right. So like in terms of like how does somebody? I had this conversation with somebody that last week on the podcast in terms of, because find your passion and find what you love. You'll never work another day in your life. Like all these words again that are out there on social media in our universe right now. And that stuff is repetitive and it's out there because there is value in it. There is purpose in it. It is important. But again, I think it gets out there so much. We see it so much. We hear it so much, and it gets it can be overwhelming, and then it really waters things down. But how does somebody that doesn't know what sets their soul on fire, somebody that doesn't know what they're passionate about, doesn't know like what they love, how does a human being begin to explore kind of like what they're passionate about if they really don't know?
So with this one, I think it's best to keep it simple, because we can get caught up in like, I don't know what I'm passionate about. But sometimes the answer is right in front of you. Like, for example, one time I had a client who, that was her thing. She's like, I don't know, I try this and I try that, and like I'm not passionate about anything. Like and she was so caught up in finding the one thing she was passionate about.
Yeah.
But really, like, just by doing new things and like meeting new people, like that's eventually like what she figured out what she loved. Like you don't have to, like, maybe you don't have one thing. Maybe it's just like being around people who are passionate and like-minded. That's enough, and that's fine. Like you don't have to go out there and be like, oh, I want to be a coach and I have to go coach people. But I think it's just like keep it simple and just start. So right now, if you're just going to your job, going to the gym, and then coming home and repeat, like we'll start trying new things. Like there's a million, maybe not right now, so a lot of events are getting canceled, but like eventually, like, there's meetup groups. Go read a book, or if you don't like reading a book, get it on Audible. Just start experiencing things.
Yeah.
We live in a time where you have access to anything you want.
Absolutely.
And most of it doesn't cost a lot of, like, I mean, we're in a library right now. Like, so if you like, oh, I can't afford books, well, go rent one from your library.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we just, as much as people say, oh, I want to find my passion, but then they have these blocks where they're so caught in their comfort zone of not exploring or not trying anything that they're like, oh, I can't do that. And it's like, well, how about instead of I can't do that, just think, how can I do that? Like, and that's a lot of the coaching I do. It's mindset coaching, right? It's like just shift that mindset, shift your belief, and anything's possible that you want to be possible. So I'd say keep it simple and just start exploring.
That is exactly what my other guest, whose podcast episode I released this past Friday, that's what he said. Just his terminology was try new things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Now, I want to talk about fear for a minute, because fear for me personally, is something that has held me back, and fear causes and creates anxiety and turmoil within us. My perspective of fear is that fear is of our imagination. Like we create these fears, which then creates these anxieties, and it's just this whole mess within us. So the way that I've had to break through my personal fears, which is directly correlated with my anxieties, I've had to change my mindset and say, okay, like this fear, this thing that is holding you back, Quentin, like it's a creation of your mind. It's not even real,
I love
dude.
that.
Like it's come on. So anyways, that's some of my self-talk, and mine's probably a little bit more masculine, a little bit more aggressive, right? Than maybe some of your coaching and things like that. But talk about fear in terms of like, when you're meeting with people and they start kind of unpacking their story, like, how much does fear hold us human beings back from your personal experience and then your experience as a coach and really trying to help people in their lives?
Yeah. So first thing that comes to mind with that is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Like fear we see as being uncomfortable. But I look at fear, like I've said with anxiety and depression, it's like, look at it as your best friend, invite it in. Like you don't have to eliminate it or make it wrong, but like just let it be there. And I was talking about this with someone yesterday, that it's like, yeah, fear can be a good motivator if you let it, but it's not usually sustainable. But like, it's okay to like, well, I'm scared of this, so I'm going to try this. But also, like, I think with fear, we just want to be aware when it's something we can push through versus when maybe it's there for a reason and maybe it's telling you to slow down or like look at something or not go full force ahead. So you could be like, yeah, I'm making this up, but also like, am I? And probably you are, but like maybe there's something to it. Like, I'll give you an example. I do a lot of public speaking for my day job because I MC my events and I lead board meetings and I'm used to being in front of people, but I'm always in the facilitator role. So this is actually this is my second podcast interview. My very first one, I was so nervous and I was like freaking myself out going into it. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to be terrible. Like, what do I say? Like, ugh. And then luckily it was with Andy. And so I kind of like,
he's a good dude.
Yeah. And I went in there and I sat down and like, I messed up like saying my name, I was like, I'm so nervous. And he's like, why are you nervous? Like you public speak all the time. And I was like, yeah, but usually I'm helping other people tell the story. I'm not used to being the like center of attention, so to speak. But the point of that is, even though I know I'm capable, and then I recently did another one, and then like even before this, there was like a little nerve, a little fear, and like there's this little voice being like, "Oh, just reschedule. Like this is too scary." But then I can see that like no, like that is just the perfectionist coming out that wants to do everything personally, and so I'm like, I see you, I hear you, but like we're okay, and I'm just gonna go do it anyway. So again, it's like the being able to detach from it, know that it's not part of you, that you are not your fear, and then from there being like, okay, in this like calm neutral zone, how do I want to proceed? And that's what's been really powerful for me, is like let the fear come up, acknowledge it, and then it's just like, it's okay, like I'm gonna do it anyway.
Yeah, see, that's a little bit more of a that's a little bit more gentle approach for me, because I'm gonna attack my fear, I'm gonna kick it in the face.
That's funny.
But hey, you know, there's things for me to learn in terms of just
Just give
I'm not gonna be able to like talk to it.
Just give your fear a hug next time.
No, that's too much for me. I'll kick in the
I'll
face,
give your
but no
fear a
hugs.
hug.
I can't even.
For everyone.
I can't bring myself to even think about me like talking to that. I just can't do that. But it's good though. That's the beautiful thing though, Erica's like we're all uniquely similar, but we're all uniquely different.
Yeah.
And it's good because you sharing your story, saying, you know, I talk to my depression and fear and anxiety, like that's gonna resonate with some people. Me saying, dude, like I kick it in the face, I'm gonna attack it, I'm gonna break through it, I'm gonna choke slam it. That might speak to somebody else, you know.
Well,
so
and
it's good.
I always say this, I love coaching because I don't even see it as being competitive, because the people that are going to resonate with me will resonate with me, and I can help them. But the people that don't, and they'll go find someone else who does. So like I never worry about like, oh, there's not enough clients, because like there's always going to be someone who needs what I can give, and you know, same for you. So it's this beautiful, beautiful world.
And see, you know, the interesting thing about myself is like, and maybe it is because I am like super type A, and like, you know, I'm you know, like I consider myself like a man's man, right? And I respond better. Like if I was gonna go to like a counselor and seek counseling, like I would go to a female counselor, because I'm pretty confident it's because of like my relationship with my own mom. Like she's my best friend, and she's, you know, like just, you know, she's nurtured me. That's the best way to put her. Right?
Sure.
Even, you know, being the age I am now as a grown man, but like I really feel like my connection with my own mom and the way that I love her and appreciate her and respect her, I feel like now not all females, because, you know, sometimes like if they have the wrong energy or whatever, like that doesn't appeal to me. But in the terms of like counseling and sharing my feelings and opening up and all that, and like coaching and things like that, like I'm gonna respond a lot better to a female. Like again, it has to be like the right type of female, you know, not too aggressive, not too much in the masculine. But I respond, and I know this about myself, I respond a lot better in certain situations when I'm seeking certain, you know, advice, help, all that, right? Guidance and counseling. Like I respond better to the feminine than the masculine, because I already have enough masculine and I already like have enough like intensity within myself. I don't need somebody trying to like match that, or you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I need, in a lot of situations, I need
balance.
That feminine energy, just, you know, just to kind of like chill me out a little bit.
And that's
so it's good.
So
it's good,
important
you know?
to know, just that self-awareness.
Yeah, I know. So it's because of my mom.
Thanks,
She's
Mom.
gonna listen to this. I'm blaming you, Mom, but it's good.
Thanks, Mom.
I love you. It's so good, Mom. Okay, so we've been going for almost an hour and a half. So let's kind of head towards the finish line, Erica.
Sure.
What's kind of been like you've been here in Denver, you mentioned, for 5 years. It's been?
Yeah.
What's kind of like just been your overall experience in terms of being here in Denver? How has just like being in this environment, and you know, kind of like in this city, around the people that this city attracts, how has that really been vital in like your growth and maturity as a woman?
Well, the way I usually explain it is coming from Sacramento, which is a lovely place, but most of the people I know there, they live there because they were either born there or maybe they moved there for like a government job and never left. They didn't choose to live there. Whereas almost everyone I know that lives in Denver, my circle that I roll with here or whatever, we've all like chosen to live here in a sense. I mean, I do know some natives obviously, but it like my story is not unique, right? Like people came here for college and never left, or they just came to visit and just were like, I want to move here. So I think there's this really special energy being in a place where people choose to live because they love it and it's happy. And then also, I'm sure this is your experience as well, but like the community of entrepreneurs and just like driven people is so collaborative. Like everyone wants, like anyone I meet that hears like I started a business, like, oh, how can I help you? Like, do you want to collaborate? Like anything you need, let me know. So it's just so supportive. And I travel around a lot and meet people from all over the country, and like I've never experienced that myself, and I've never found anyone that was like, yeah, that's definitely how it is everywhere else. So I think just that being in a supportive community, somewhere where, I mean, the access to the outdoors is just, we live in an amazing place. So the growth has been, I think, just helping me like stay grounded and focus on my healing and
What's kind of something like currently as we sit here today that you are still really intentionally focusing on to kind of like break through or overcome in terms of like that healing process and that growth process?
Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna get a little personal, but relationships. My last relationship ended at the end of last year, and we're on good terms. We're friends. He's awesome, but we just weren't right for each other. Yeah. And I can manifest the what out of like career and like what I need and want in life, but like relationship I've had, and like love, I've had to, because it was kind of new realization to heal, like we were talking about my very first love, and like heal that and let go of that, and then come back to myself and learn that like I don't need to be in a relationship to feel whole. And so right now I think the universe is like, girl, just be good on your own. And then when it's right, that will happen. So right now it's just a constant reminder of like, not constant reminder, but I'm just constantly feeling into how whole and full and wonderful I can feel on my own, and like not have that sense of lack of like, oh, I need to be in a relationship so I can do all these things. So that's definitely my focus right now is just feeling bliss all the time, no matter what's happening, and leaning into my friends and my support system.
Do when you think about like a significant other and like a long-term relationship, if I mean, do you get like anxious over that at times, and you have to really control like that mindset and that and as you would say, like kind of sit with that anxiety?
Not anymore. So I am at a place where like right now where that doesn't happen anymore. I will get into a place where I'm like, oh, I want to go on all these trips, but I want to wait till like I have a boyfriend to travel with. I'm like, no, if I want to travel, I can do that on my own too, Yeah. So maybe those thoughts, but otherwise, no. Like I'm so happy. Doesn't even seem like a word that describes it enough. But I feel I'm satisfied, complete, fulfilled. Yeah. Like that's the beauty of figuring out who you are and then taking action that aligns with who you are. Because that's where like the surrender is. Like resisting what is takes a lot of energy, and that just means like making what's happening not be okay. So the fact that I am single is okay, and that's it. I'm not even really dating right now because I'm just like like I have so many other awesome things to focus on, and I love my friends, and my work travel schedule just opened up because of coronavirus, so I've got a little more free time. But
so maybe you'll go on a few dates.
That's what my mom said. She's like, maybe you'll have time to date now. I'm like, okay, Mom, I'll work on that. But
so this is a great example of why I'm sure you're going to agree with me. I believe everything happens for a reason, because like when I look at my life and some of the things the stories that I told myself, and like things that I thought I wanted, like when I was like in my early to mid 20s, like I want to get married and have a family and all this stuff, right? So it's like you talked about, Guy, the Canadian individual, right? And like, imagine like if you would have got married and like would have taken that direction, like you probably, and maybe would have happened, further down the road, but like you wouldn't be here right now.
Right.
And that's what I think about. I'm like, and my faith is very important to me, and like God is a big part of my life. So it's like for me, I'm like, okay, I always look back and be like all these things I was like praying for, and like, oh, I want to get married and have, like in my early 20s and stuff, and I'm like, thank you, God, for not allowing that to happen and knowing what's best for me. Because seriously, like, I moved out here to Colorado, like, it'll be 3 years in July. It's like just my personal maturing and like growth. Like just my time out here in Colorado, it's unbelievable.
Right.
And I look back and I'm like, dude, like if I would have, pursued that relationship or whatever. And for me, it's like even just like dating for the first time in a very long time last year, and some things that I thought I wanted, stories I was telling myself, and then like actually experiencing these, these relationships and whatever. I'm just like, I don't really think that's like what I want. You know what I mean?
Oh
so
my
it's
gosh,
like
yeah.
everything does happen for a reason. Like I firmly believe that, and like what you're just talking about right now is like, and your story previously, like it's a perfect example, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And with the relationship stuff, like I went through with what happened in my last relationship. Like I had this realization that I was holding on to the idea of what a relationship is based on what my parents' relationship is, which is great for them, but I'm like, oh, I guess I don't have, like, that doesn't have to be what I do, and it's not, some of it's not even what I want to do. And of course the stories are different, so like it never could be just like that. So instead of comparing to these ideals or the stories that we tell, it's like sitting down and being like, well, what is a relationship, and what do I want it to look like? What do I want, more importantly, what do I want it to feel like? Because that's really what it's important. It's like, how do I want to feel in partnership so that when he does come along, that he is like being invited into this like beautiful world and space that I've created for myself. Because before, any partner I had attracted was like filling a void for me, right? Like making me feel safe or making me feel better. It was just a Band-Aid for everything. So now it's like, no, I want to be in a place where I am whole myself, and the relationship's just the icing on the cake.
Something else that I learned, and I think is very valuable for just us as human beings, is that, and I had this talk with a couple girls that I was dating, is that like we had this conversation. It's like, and I think this is a very healthy place to be. And I see a lot of people not in this place when they get in these relationships, or they get married or whatever all that is, start having a family. Is like, I don't need you, and you don't need me. Yeah. Because how many times you see grown adults get into these relationships, or they bounce around from relationship to relationship, significant others and things like that, where it's like, and I think that's what you were talking about, filling that void. It's like, I'm not whole, I'm not complete, I don't know who I am, but let me invite this person in my life, let me chase after this person, let me hunt them down, let me hold on to them. And it's just like, it's just this crazy mess. So it's like, for me, when I enter into a relationship, with a significant other, it's like, it's very important to say like, okay, like I want this experience, but I don't need this experience. I want to spend time with you and all of that, but like, I don't need you. Yeah. Like, you're not going to complete me. I'm not going to complete you. You don't need me. And if two human beings can be on that ground in terms of entering into a relationship, I think that's like the healthiest way to start a significant other relationship. Yep. Because if I need somebody else to like create this happiness or joy or whatever, like that is absolute trouble waiting to happen, right? Yeah, absolutely. And even a lot of people have this limiting belief that they don't deserve love, and so when you get into a relationship with someone, you can start sabotaging it because maybe it's too good to be true or whatever it is. So it's like, if you don't, like we said, if you don't clear out your past in order to make room for your future, it's going to keep popping up. Like, it's not going to go away. You can shove it down as much as you want, but it's not going anywhere. Yep. Spoken very well. Okay. Who do you want to become? Like, what is kind of like your focus in terms of like a human being, that growth, that maturity, like, I know it's very important to be present, but I think it's very important to look at our past and study it and let go of it. I also think it's very important to study our future, prepare for our future as we're sitting in the present, right? So kind of like as you look into the future and that, like, what is that individual, what is that human being, that woman that you, Erica, want to become?
What comes up for me when you say that is that I want to become the person that is so in touch with like her intuition and herself and what she wants and what she needs, that like she will always just go for that direction. So like I think in a lot of ways I live that way. Like I'm like, oh, if I need something or want something, like I go get it or take it or create it for myself. But in some ways I still am a little restricted by the fear. Like for instance, leaving my day job. I'm still like, oh, that sounds really scary, even though it doesn't. I love what I do. It doesn't fulfill me. I love the coaching and other stuff more. So it's like part of, some days I wake up and I'm like, I'm just going to quit my job. And then I'm like, nope, that's still a little too scary. So we're not going to do that yet.
Yeah, I did that back in September of last year. So just before you do that, just make sure it's really like what you want.
Right. Yeah.
It's not what social media and Instagram and everything and all these, successful entrepreneurs make it out to be. So
yeah, if my boss is listening, don't worry, I'm not going anywhere yet. But yeah, so I hear stories of people doing that, and who knows how true it is or if they're really that aligned. But I'm like, I believe that you can be, and that's the freedom and pleasure value that I added. It's a little to help get me there, to remember it's like, what action am I about to take, and is this aligned with like what feels best and what's best for me, and just just keep going along with the journey of life as aligned as possible.
Beautiful. Okay, before I ask you the last question, is there kind of like a final maybe word or a message or something that's just really in your heart right now? Maybe it's something you recently posted on your social media, just something that maybe you want to kind of leave with the listeners before I ask the last question and we wrap everything up.
I think my message would just be to anyone who is dealing with severe anxiety or depression or feeling like you don't have anywhere to turn, because that was my story for a very long time. I just want to remind you that there is always somewhere to turn, and that you are not your feelings, you're not your anxiety, and like there is a way through this. It just takes a little intention and action. So just know that like if some of the stuff we're talking about sounds like impossible or hard, like it's not. Like I can't even tell you like how like the last few years have just like from where I was to where I am now, like the transformation and the happiness, and like sometimes I just walk around just like looking around me, I'm just like, the world is so beautiful and life is so beautiful, and like we can all get to that point. I believe.
All right, last question. What sets your soul on fire?
Helping people. I don't know, that's maybe a little cheesy, but like for me, coaching, when I got my first client and I had my first coaching call, like I had been unofficially coaching all my friends for years, but when I got like my first client, I sat down and like listened and got to like do my thing, and I was just it's the most present I feel, it's the most alive I feel, and I'm just like, it's just the most amazing thing to be able to have gone through what I've gone through, to go through what I'm going through, and then attract people who are similar and can benefit from the lessons that I've learned. Like that is what makes me really excited.
Good stuff. That's like for me podcasting, like when I just get to sit with another human being and just listen to their story, like it's
amazing.
I can't even explain it, but it sets my soul on fire, and I'm like,
and isn't that so like, and that's the thing, like it doesn't have to be like, to find what sets your soul on fire, like it doesn't have to look any certain way. It can just be anything.
Exactly. And that's the thing, even, going back to what we just talked about just a minute ago in terms of like quitting your job, it's like, that might be for you. That might not be for you.
Right. And
like that's the thing where it's like, I love Instagram. IG, if you listen to any episodes, you always hear me say like, Instagram is my jam. Like I love Instagram. I love social media. Like I love just the generation we're living in right now. It's so awesome. It's so great, right? But with all that being said, like there's so much information, and because of social media, everybody's putting their stuff out there, and we see all the highlight reels and all this stuff, and I get caught up in it where it's like, you know, I gotta quit my job, and I gotta go to be a life coach, and then I want to do this, and then this, and it's just like, I've had to, you know, during this time when I quit my teaching job back in September, and then, you know, I've just been basically part-time personal training and just kind of living pretty low or whatever, and it's been a very challenging season of my life, and there's been a lot of days where I'm just like, I am so ready for this season of life to be over, but it's not yet, so I need to keep learning, right? But that's the thing. Just very recently, within the last month, I've had to go back because like I'm all over the place. I'm like, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to connect to that person. I want to do 3 podcasts in one day, and I want to do, you know, all whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, time out, Quentin. Like, I had to revisit, like, why am I, Quentin Vars, why am I here on this earth? Like, what is my purpose? Yeah. Because I know that I can do a lot of things, and I love doing a lot of things, and I love being in 1,000 places at once, but like you said, you used a word, it's a beautiful word earlier, that's unsustainable. Yeah. So it might be for you to quit your job. It might not be. Like, not everybody can quit your full-time, you know, job or whatever and benefits and go be an entrepreneur. Like, that's not for everybody. So what I'm trying to say, just kind of like wrapping this up, is that like, it's so important for us to find what sets our soul on fire. It's so important to know what our purpose is, to know what our passion is. And like I had a conversation with somebody earlier in the week, it's like, that might not pay the bills, and that's okay. Yeah. Just do, like, why are you here? Yeah. Like, it's great to listen to your story. It's great to listen to my story, but you're Erica. I'm Quentin. Like, I can gain and glean from you and vice versa, but, like, you're living your life. I'm living my life. Like, you got to do your thing. I got to do my thing. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important just to, like, have our foundation in our lives and to do what we believe we're supposed to be doing and not what everybody else, because that everybody else and trying to chase after everything else, like that just hinders and it slows you down and it stunts your growth, you know. Exactly. So it's like purpose and move in that direction. So Erica, if somebody, which I know there's going to be people that have resonated with a part of your story, with all of your story, if they've just gained some great value in just what you've shared with us today, where can people find out more about you? Where can people follow along? Where can people, if they're interested maybe in some of your coaching and things like that, if they're interested in getting connected with Women in It Together, where can people find all of that information? So the best resource would be Instagram. So my coaching Instagram handle is poweredby_positivity. And then for Women in It Together, if you are a female in Denver, we have a few events per month, and it's a really, really amazing community. So that Instagram handle is WIT, WIIT Denver, and we post about the events there. And also for anyone who listened to this podcast and gets to the end, and if you are interested in learning what it's like to coach with me, I'm offering a free 30-minute discovery call for anyone that listens to this podcast. So just reach out to me to Powered by Positivity, send me a DM, and we'll get that scheduled. Beautiful. All right. So Erica, I just want to thank you for not giving into that fear and saying, you know what, I'm going to do this podcast and share my story. But seriously, thank you for taking time out of your schedule, your life, to come onto the 127 Fit podcast, share your story, and just share some of your insights. It's greatly appreciated. Yeah, thank you so much. For sure. So 127 Fit podcast listeners, once again, I just want to thank you for your listening ears. They're always greatly appreciated. If you'd like to find out more about the guests that I'm bringing on the podcast, or if you'd like to find out more about myself personally, you can find that information on Instagram at 127fit. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. LinkedIn is at Quentin Vars. If you guys would do me a huge favor and please leave a 5-star rating and review, and also subscribe to the podcast, especially on the iTunes Apple podcast app, that would be cool. If you think you would be a great guest, or if you have a friend or an acquaintance you think would be a great guest or guest for the 127 Fit podcast, you can just give this email out or send an email to me. The email is 127fit@gmail.com. And as you guys are finding great value in a specific episode or episodes of the 127 Fit podcast, I would just ask another huge favor of you, and that would be take that specific episode and episodes that you're finding that value in, and share it on your Instagram and Facebook stories using the hashtag #BeSomeoneToFollow. And per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time, until next time, I will catch you guys later.